All right, what I'm going to try to do today between 8 and 10 is to go over both Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. They're both short chapters, and we've already covered most of the material that's on or in Chapter 5 already. Chapter 5, as it says in here, remember there is an acronym that's called CRUD that stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. So far, we've just looked at the read stuff in a lot of detail. That's the select statement. Create is insert, update, and delete, respectively. All right. Now, one thing, please look at this on the screen here. It says, as you read this chapter, keep in mind that by default, MySQL automatically commits changes to the database immediately. So in other words, if you're about to change the database, you want to make sure that before you do it, that you're running the query you wanted to run. As an example, and I showed you this a while back, but I just want to say it again. Let's just imagine for a second here that we had, I don't know, 500 employees at a company. And what I wanted to say was update employees, set salary equal to salary times 10 or 0.10, where department equal accounting. I'm asking you this question. If you look up on the screen there, does that make sense that what I'm saying is give everyone who works in accounting a 10% raise? Does that make sense? All right. Well, if I do this, now I've just given the whole company a 10% raise. Does that make sense? All right. Because the error that most, especially beginning developers make, is to do something like this when they mean to do something like that. All right. So what we could do before even running this is we could say, for example, there's a big difference between select salary from employees and select salary from employees where department equal accounting. Now, one of the reasons I like to spread this over multiple lines is it kind of forces you to think about what's going on in every line. All right? So this is going to give you back, if there's 500 employees, 500 salaries. This, if you've got 50 people working in accounting, is only going to give you back 50 salaries. So it's really important before you run any kind of thing like this. Just real quickly, as another example, let's suppose that for whatever reason, you decided to fire everybody who works in accounting. Maybe something bad happened in the company. So I want to say delete from employees. Again, I'll put it in 2 lines. Where department equals accounting. Now, you should be able to look at that and figure out that's going to fire the entire accounting department. They're all gone. All right. But if I accidentally do this, now every employee is gone. It doesn't matter how many there are. All right. And unless you work at a company that backs up their database on a regular basis, if you had 1,000 employees and you didn't have that backed up, you've got to enter in all those employees again or hope that they're in a file someplace. Does that make sense? All right. So just keep that in mind as we start looking through this. Now, the first thing they do is they tell you about a test table. Is this important? Not really, but you should be able to figure this out. If you look at this example right here, right where I've got the hand resting, I've got it on the word as, but you can see it. What that does literally is it makes a copy of a table. That's all it does. So it says run select star from invoices, which gives you everything in the invoices, but it tells you to take that and create a brand new table called invoice copy. So it grabs everything, and instead of showing it on the screen, all right, it just creates a new table. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, if you wanted to play around with the data to make sure that, or you wanted to do something to make sure you had a copy, All right. You don't have to copy every record like they show here. We can only copy part of the records. So again, I could go back and show you the examples I just showed you, but we could do an insert or a create table, I should say, and we could do exactly what we just did. We could say, for example, create table employees copy as select star from employees. Or if we wanted just the accounting, we could say select star from employees where department equals accounting. All right. Sometimes what you'll see is when people make copies of tables like this, invoices copy is a stupid name. All right. But a lot of times when you create a copy of a table, you'll put underscore log on the end of it. It's a log table, meaning you're logging what's currently in there. Again, you don't have to do it like that, but that's kind of recommended that you do it that way. All right. Again, does this make sense? Looking at the screen right here, right there. Does that make sense? That will physically remove all the records from the table. Does that make sense? The table is still there. I'm sorry, with the drop, the table is gone. If I said delete star, or if I said delete, and I put old invoices, it would remove all the data but keep the table. If I do this, it says remove everything. All right. So again, it's considered that probably the two most dangerous commands you can run are update and delete. Insert's not a dangerous command. At the worst case, you're going to add some records you didn't mean to add. But for update and for delete, you're changing or removing existing data. That's pretty dangerous. So you should know what it is you're doing before you do it. So they give you some examples here. You've seen some of this stuff. If you please look on the screen. That adds one record to a table. Notice what they don't have there. They don't have vendor ID, invoice number. They don't have all this stuff in there. As I mentioned to you last week, if you're adding every single field, you don't need to put the fields in here like this. You don't need to do it. You can do it, but you don't need to. Now, most important thing I've said so far today is this. Let's say that I want to add everything in there, but I want to put it in a different order. Look at the order that's up here. Invoice ID, vendor ID, invoice number, invoice date. Everybody see this? See that order? See down here, we want to put all this information in, but we want to put it in a different order. Then you have to list the field names. You have to do that. And you might say, well, if it's in that order, why would you want to put it in a different order? You can never account for the quirkiness of people. Some people just, you know what, I know it's like that. I'm not going to change it, but I want to put it in this order. You can do that. But if you want to put it in that order, then you have to list the field names. All right? You saw this already. We did this before. That's how you put in multiple records. Notice that each set of records is in their own set of parentheses. All right? So you can do that. You were asked on your assignment to add yourself in there as a new record into the customers table. So you'd be doing it more like this. All right? Now notice how to insert default values and null values. We have the example they give here, pardon my French, their example sucks. It just does. It's a stupid example. So don't look at this stuff. Look at this up here. Please look at this. First of all, notice auto increment. Hopefully, again, you realize if you have auto increment for the name of your primary key, typically that would be a primary key, then don't ever put in the value. Did you hear that? Don't ever put it. It's automatically putting it in, and with each new record, it's automatically adding 1 to that ID. You don't do it. But I think I mentioned this to you the other day. So let's say we put in 5 records. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Now let's say we remove record 3 for whatever reason. Now when we put in a new one, it goes 6. we've lost that number 3 for good when we use auto increment. But that's still considered a better practice than not putting it in. The other one too is this, default. Now I mentioned to you again, if I was doing some kind of a database for Rankin, I probably would, if I had a field called state, I might default it to MO or to Missouri, that kind of thing. Sometimes the stuff that you're going to at least potentially use for a default value just makes sense. Why do you put in a default value? So that the people entering the information have got less to type. If they've got less to type, then there's less of a chance they're going to screw it up. All right? So that's the whole rationale behind that. Now, I'm going to skip this right now. It says how to use a subquery because Chapter 7 that we'll cover in a couple days is all on subqueries. So I don't want to talk about that right now. All right? But one thing they do mention here, and again, if you are, this is for an update, which we're going to talk about now, or a delete, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes. If you're going to do an update or a delete, all right, so if I think to myself, you know what, I want to remove Evan from the database. Let's say that he's graduated, and I want to get him, so I want to delete from existing students, and I want to delete him. Then I want to go and run a query first, a select, to get all of his information and make sure that's the right Evan. Because I've got an Evan R in this class, and believe it or not, I've got an Evan R in my afternoon class. All right? And that's Evan Resnock. And he will be removed probably from some database because in about 6 weeks, he'll be graduating. All right? Or else he'll be moved to another database if they hold the graduates in the database. I don't know how it works here. All right. The next is update. Look at the syntax. What you will get in here probably a week from today. All right. This week, again, remember, tomorrow, I already mentioned this to you, I'm only going to be here till 10. Then I got to run off to O'Fallon and give a talk on Career Day at the high school. All right. So I'll only be here till 10. All right. And then we have class Wednesday, we have class Thursday. You all heard this already now, right? No classes Friday, no school Friday. It's Good Friday, whatever you want to call the holiday. There's no classes. All right? And hopefully by the end of the day on Friday, you will be turning me in your first worksheet. Next week, Monday, you'll get your second worksheet. And that'll be on all the stuff, chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So from chapter 5, it'll be expected that you can go in and either insert new records into one of the tables, or update records in the tables, or delete records in the tables. That's what's going to be expected that you can do in here. All right? So again, if you take a look, I'm going to bring this up. I haven't brought it up yet, so I'm going to start up, come in here and start up XAMPP. And I'm going to do my MySQL -u root. All right. One thing, I don't know if I showed you this or not, but I do want to show it to you right now. If you look up everybody, please look on the screen, because everybody does this at one time or another. So I'm going to exit from here. All right. Now I want to go back in again. And it's MySQL -u root, right? You all know that. Don't put a semicolon on the end. Even though it looked like it worked, what that can do is that can end up kicking you out later, prematurely. Don't ask me why, because it's happened before to other students. All right? So I'm going to exit and get in the right way, which is just MySQL -root, like that. All right, so I'm in. You already know this, but if I do a show databases, there's my databases, and I'm going to grab one of these. I don't want to use the sales orders example, but I'm going to grab this bowling league example. So I'm going to use bowling league example. Bowling league. You got to spell it right, though. All right. And now I'm going to show tables. All right. And you notice, for example, I've got a thing in here. Let's describe teams. That's good because it's small. All right. So there's a team ID, there's a team name, and there's a captain ID. Everybody agree with that? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say this. Select star from teams. All right? So there's our teams right now. Okay? So we want to add a brand new team. I want you right now, okay, so there's the teams that are in there, and I want to describe teams. All right? I want you to help me. I'll get it started. Okay? Let's add a new record into teams. So what do? I start with insert into teams. All right? And I can put in here team ID, team name, captain ID, all right, values, and then I just put in those three values. Does that make sense? All right. We don't have an auto increment up here. The last one was 10, so I'll manually put in 11. We'll call this, will be the Rankin Raiders. All right. So that's going to be our team name. And our captain ID, when we look up here, well, you can see that. I don't see one that's got a number. How about a number 11? I don't see an 11. All right, since we are 11 here, we'll put 11 here. All right. Says we have an error in our syntax. All right, and let's see if we can figure out what the error is. Right near the thing at line 3. So it looks like it's in here. That's an int, that's a varchar, and that's an int. All right. Insert into teams. Double check and make sure I'm using the right syntax. Thought I was. Insert into teams. Okay. Oh, because did I put value second? No. Team ID. That's right. Team name. That's right. Captain ID. That's right. Values. Looks correct to me. Then in parens, an int. All right. A varchar. And an int. Well, there's something it doesn't like here.
Semicolon after the...
See that? You're right. See that? I'd like to say, yeah, I did that on purpose to see if you were looking. No, I did it incorrectly because I screwed up. So insert into teams, this. So what he's saying here is remove that. I'd put a semicolon in on the end. All right. One row affected. Select star from teams. And there we are at the bottom. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Well, let's say that we decided we didn't want to be called the Rankin Raiders. We wanted to be called the Rankin Red Raiders because Rankin's color, of course, is red. All right. Now, we can come in here and say update teams, set team name equal, and I'm going to put this to Rankin Red Raiders, and I can say now if I would have put a semicolon there, does it make sense to everybody? Now every team name would be Rankin Red Raiders. That would not be a good thing. And there is no undo command in here. All right? So I want to say where. Now, please look up on the screen because this is the most important thing of what I'm telling you in here. When I change this, I can say any one of three things. I can say do this where team ID equal 11, or I can say where team name equal Rankin Raiders, or I can say where captain ID equal 11. Does that make sense? The recommendation is that you always, always, always check the key field, the primary key field. Our primary key here is the team ID. So we want to do that where team ID equal 11. Hit enter. It says one was changed. All right, there's no warnings, which is always good. And notice we're now the Rankin Red Raiders. Does all that make sense? All right. If we don't want that, we just, we didn't have enough people to make up a team. Now we can say delete from teams. Now again, if I just hit semicolon now, it's going to remove every team. But again, I can do the same kind of thing. I can say where team ID equal 11, which is the safest way to do it. Or I can say where team name equal Rankin Red Raiders. Or I can say where captain ID equal 11. Again, the recommendation is that you always use this. All right. Now, I'm going to purposely put a mistake in here. All right. I purposely put a mistake in there. Why? Because I'm about to remove this. So what I could run first is select star from teams where team ID equal 11. See how that just gives me my information? You quite often are going to want to run a select statement before you come in here and you say delete from teams where team ID equal 11. So by me running that first, I was sure that I was removing the right one. So you should, after going through and listening to this lecture and going through what's in the chapter, all right, you should be able to come in and do any kind of an insert or any kind of an update or any kind of a delete. Does that make sense? Again, I'm going to leave the subquery stuff off. We're going to hit on that tomorrow or the next day. And then again, deleting existing rows. You can put multiple things in here. Notice where invoice ID equals 78 and invoice sequence equal 2. You could put ands, you could put ors, you could make this as big as you want to make it. What I'm telling you is you're going to have probably 5 questions or so on your next, maybe 6, maybe 2 inserts, maybe 2 updates, maybe 2 deletes. I don't know, I didn't write it yet. All right. That's it for the chapter. So I'm going to jump right into the next chapter. And the next chapter starts section 2 in the book. And section 2 in the book starts on page 167. More SQL skills as you need them. We are going to go over this week chapters 6, 7, 8, and 9. All right, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I should say. When you come in next Monday, you will get your next worksheet. On that next worksheet, it'll be due then a week from Monday. Next Monday, I believe, is like the 2nd. I got my math right. It is. So that one will be due the 9th. Make sense? All right. And what we will do next week, Monday will be lab, entire period. Tuesday will be lab, entire period. Wednesday, we'll go over chapters, I want to do 10, 11, 12, and 13. I believe those are the last 4 that are in the book that we're going to cover. It's how to create a database, for lack of better words. So we're going to look at all of that stuff. In fact, it's 10, 11, and 12. That'll work out real well. Then what you're going to get to do is you're going to design the database that we're going to use when we jump back into C# and we start writing that CRUD program. So you will have the database already designed for you. That's what we'll have left to do. All right, that'll get us into about the middle of April and the rest of the month for April. All right, going into the beginning of May, we're going to be working on creating one more C# program where we're going to combine together forms like we've been doing, and we're going to combine that together along with the database stuff. All right, so that's what's left. All right, so chapter 6 is on summarizing data. Now I'm going to ask you a question that's going to sound, even for me, kind of strange, but I'm going to ask it anyway. All right? So I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to say select captain ID from teams. Okay, there they are. Okay. Now, if I said to you, what's the biggest captain ID in there? You could all give it to me. I get that. If I said to you, what's the smallest captain ID? You could give me that too. Did you notice when we did it up here, it wasn't in order? But when we just asked for this, it was in order? All right. If I said to you, Evan, what's the biggest captain ID? And he said 32. And I said, why? All right, you ever hear that like with a little kid? Why? Because it's the biggest number. Why? Because there aren't numbers bigger than that. Why? You know, you just keep asking. Remember, when you're talking to a computer, you're talking to the equivalent of an 18-month-old child. And an 18-month-old child is going to ask why for everything. So the point is, even though you and I could look at this, that doesn't mean that the system could look at it and figure it out. So what we could type in there as an example is this. Select max team ID from teams. And why did it give me 10? Well, that was sure interesting because there's no 10 in there. So let's look at it again. First of all, yep, that's the right one. Describe teams. All right. Captain ID. Oh, I don't want the team ID. I want the captain ID. It actually did give me the right number. All right, 32. And if there's a max, does it make sense to you that there'd also be a min? Does that make sense? So the max is 32. The min is 2. Those are called aggregate queries. All right? Now, I don't think you'd ever do this, but you're all smart enough to know this. If I asked you, you could all, I said you have 2 minutes. Add these numbers up here and divide them by 10. Would you agree you could all give me a number? Would that make sense to you? You could. But I could come in here and say this. So I showed you quickly max and min. All right? How about the average captain ID from teams? And it gives me an ugly-ass number, pardon my French, okay, to a bunch of decimal places. Well, I could say, you know what, if you're going to give me that average ID, I only want it to 1 decimal place. So I want you to round the answer to 1 decimal place. Okay? Not only that, boy, that's an ugly, look at that title. That's really pretty ugly. So I could run all this, and when I got done, I could say as at AVG, I don't know, captain ID. Captain ID. That looks a little nicer. All right. So what I've just shown you are 3 of the 6 or so aggregate functions. I showed you max, I showed you min, and I showed you average. Now, please look up on the screen here. All right, I'm going to describe teams again. All right, I've got a team ID, a team name, and a captain ID. What if I did this? Select min team name from teams. Is that going to work? Is that going to work? The Barracudas. Select max team name from teams. Terrapins. All right. They look like they both worked. How about this? Is that going to work? The answer is no. Because I'm trying to do, that is a mathematical operation. That says add these and divide by the total number. So I don't believe, at least. It gives me 0. But notice, 10 warnings. So I show the warnings. says, I didn't know what to do because I tried taking a double and making that a double and it didn't know how to do it. So the point is, I've quickly shown you min, max, and AVG, which is average. Min and max can be used either on numeric data or non-numeric data. Average can only be used on numeric data. That make sense? All right. So let's jump into here. Again, these are called aggregate functions. These are easy. Believe me, you like this, you'll get them. This is damn hard. Group by and having. You'll probably get about a half dozen questions, including a couple they'll make you think on how to use group by and having on your next worksheet. All right. So aggregate functions are called scalar functions. If you've never heard that term before, scalar means only one thing is returned. One thing. All right. They give you an example there of average. They give you some examples. Please look up on the screen. If you look, there are 6 basic aggregate functions. I didn't show you count or count star. I'm going to show you those in just a minute. All right? But notice when you use average, you can use the word distinct in there also. Okay? So in other words, if I did this, let's say that I had, 35 of the 50 states were in my database. Okay, but there were 10,000 records. All right, I could say, show me the min state, and it would probably show me like Alabama or Alaska or something like that. All right, I said, show me the max. I don't even know what the max is. Probably what, West Virginia? I don't know. All right, it would be something like that. All right, but do I really want it to look through 1,000 records when really it only needs to look for distinct ones? So when I do that, it's only going to find those 35 records. Does that make sense? All right, so typically, if you want to use distinct because it results in the computer having to do less work, less searches, whatever you want to call them. Let's look at these two, count and count star. All right, this is the number of non-nulls, and this is everything. All right, I'm going to jump back into bowling. Let's see if we describe bowlers. All right, would you agree, taking a look up on the screen here, would you agree that the bowlers have a first name, a middle initial, and a last name? Do you agree with that? All right, so I'm going to print them out. Select bowler, first name, comma, bowler, middle init, comma, bowler, last name from bowlers. And what did I say wrong? Bowler first name. I said bowler. All right. There's bowler first name, bowler middle initial, bowler last name from bowlers. And there they are. Okay? Yours isn't going to look exactly like this because remember I added Tony and a couple of garbage records in there. But I think you would all agree that some people do not have a middle initial, right? So their middle initial is null. So I want to show you the difference between count and count star. All right? If I say this, select count bowler middle init from bowlers. All right. It says 16. Well, there were 37 of them, but if you look, if we started counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 bowlers do not have a middle initial. So when we said count and we gave it a field that could have nulls, it didn't count the nulls. On the other hand, if I run that same query and I say select count star from bowlers, notice it gives me 37. So count star gives you everything, including nulls. Count followed by a field name strips away anything that has a null in it. All right? That's the easy part of the chapter right there. Okay? So the hard part is here. Starts on page 174 and pretty much goes for the rest of the chapter. And it's how to group and summarize data. All right? Now, please look up on the screen if you would. Again, remember, if I say show tables, all right, and we've got bowlers. So let's try this again. Let's select star from bowlers. All right. Well, there's a bunch of stuff in there. I think we'd all agree. All right. But notice, see this? There's a team ID. Does everybody see that at the end? Well, I'm going to come back and I'm going to just show this. So I'm going to select bowler first name, bowler last name, team ID from bowlers. Much easier to read. Okay? And if you look here, you'd say, well, they're in order. They were in the order they were put into the table. But if you look down here, notice the new ones I added? They're not in order. All right? But I'm going to run that same query, and I'm going to say select bowler first name, bowler last name, team ID from bowlers, but I'm going to say group by team ID. All right? And you'll notice the way that it runs, it looks, well, that's not everything. No, it's just showing you the first one. All right? But the point is, it is grouping those by team ID. All right? So when you start to work with these grouping functions, there's more work that you have to do. All right? And where this gets a little bit confusing is you can use having, which we're going to look at in a minute with group by. You can use group by and where. So some of these queries get to be a little bit, for lack of better words, funky. All right? So look on the screen if you would, please. Select the vendor ID, the invoice total, which we're going to round to 2 decimal places. From invoices, we want to group it by vendor ID. All right? So notice what that does is it's going up and it's adding all those together. You understand what I'm saying? So this is the average for each vendor. Think about why that might be important. All right? Let's suppose that you have to cut staff and you've got a bunch of different, I don't know, you've got a bunch of different salespeople. You might want to look at everything each salesperson is doing, and if you find out that, let's say Matthew's one of your salespeople, all right, and his average sales are $1 million a year. Then you go to Tony, and he's got a bunch of smaller customers because they're rural. All right, they're out in the sticks someplace. All right, and his average, let's say, is rather than $1 million, is 1,000. Well, you know the way that life works. If they're going to cut somebody, that's probably who they're going to cut. All right. So as it says here, this is the bottom of page 175. The group by clause groups the rows of a result set based on one or more columns or expression. So you group it by one or more things. All right. If we did this and we didn't put a having in there, it would show us everybody. This says only do the group by, but only show us the invoice totals that are greater than 2,000. Does that make sense? If one of these right here, this average amount, if one of these had equaled $1,999.99, it wouldn't have shown it. If one of these equaled exactly 2,000, it wouldn't have shown it. But if it equaled $2,000.01, it would show it. right? So again, the having clause allows you, it's like having a where, but it's a where for a group by. All right? So you can end up writing some pretty complex stuff. And I'm going to give you some of these for the next assignment a week from now. Some of them will be pretty easy. Some of them will be designed to make you think. All right? And again, I'm not going to lie to you, some of the stuff that you do in here, it's a little bit difficult to do. Why? Because it makes you think. All right. Probably the most important part of this chapter are pages 178 and 179. Those two pages, 178 and 179, because they compare using a having with using a group by. There's certain things in common. Having and where. So this is not a having and a group by. This compares the having and the where clauses. Both having and where allow you to filter things. All right? Let's assume, for example, I said, okay, everybody in this room who's a male, stand up. Well, you all stand up, right? I said, anybody in here who's under 23, stand up. Probably some of you would sit down. I know I would. Does that make sense? So we're starting to filter. All right? But if we said, stand up where age is, less than or equal to 23, that would be with a where. All right? But what you can also do is you can use a where clause with a having clause. And that's what they're saying here. When you include a where clause with a select that uses grouping and aggregates, MySQL provides the search condition before it does the grouping. And again, why are we even going over this stuff? It's all a matter of how much time the query takes. And if you are querying millions or potentially billions of records, using a having versus using a where can result in a query taking minutes to get the results back as opposed to seconds. That's what the author is saying. All right? When you include a having clause, all right, notice it says it applies it after the grouping has taken place. But if you use a where, it's before the grouping takes place. All right? So again, imagine that I was going to break you up into groups. And let's just say for some stupid reason, I was going to do it based on age. And then I did it on some other criteria. Well, it says if I'm going to use both a having and a where, all right, with the having, it'll do that grouping after I've done the where. All right, but if I just have a where, it'll do any kind of grouping before. All right? And sometimes where this is going to confuse you, when you do this exercise next week, it's like, I'm not sure if I should use having or if I should use where. And if that's the case, and if you don't know, you try them both. All right? So why would you do that? Because one should work and one won't work. So why would I give you an assignment like that? So you know when to use one as opposed to when to use the other. Or when to combine them and use them both. All right? All right, just a couple more pages and we're finished. Compound search conditions. Bottom line is, again, look on the screen here. You can use anding and oring. And please, even if you haven't been, please look on the screen. This is important. All right? See this? Everybody see that? Right there? That's a date. When you put in dates in MySQL, the recommendation is that you always put in year, dash, all right, month, dash, day. You put it in that format. Did you hear that? Now, can you get away with two things here? The answer is yes, but MySQL is stupid. And I believe it thinks that if you put in, for example, 50, You know, let's just say this was in the future. It was supposed to be 2050, and you wanted to put in today's date, which is what, 03/26 or whatever. It thinks that if anything is 50 or less, it thinks it's 1900. And if it's greater than 50, it thinks it's 2000. If you don't want to have any errors, always use 4 digits with the date. All right? In the last chapter, we did that min and the, or earlier in this chapter, the min and the max and the average. You can do those on dates. I could ask, when is the latest date? So I could use max on a date. When is the earliest date? I could use a min. I could even use averaging on dates because they're numbers. All right, and the last thing that's in here on pages 182 and 183 talks about you being able to use something that's called the roll-up operator. All right, it says it adds one or more summary results. Well, if you look on the screen here, all right, notice it says group by vendor ID with roll-up. All right, what this says right there, that roll-up, that invoice total, says I want you to add every single vendor invoice for vendor ID 34, and that's this number. Add every single invoice for vendor 37, and that's this total, etc. So roll-up will go when you're done, and it'll add everything up for you. You can do this without using a roll-up. There's other ways of doing it as well. All right? So that's it. I'll tell you what, it's 8:56. Let's come back. We're not going to go over Chapter 7 today. If we have time, we'll do it tomorrow. But let's take a break. When we come back from the break, please be on the system. Please be into XAMPP. And we'll look at 2 or 3 of the examples that I asked you to do for this first worksheet. All right? So let's come back. Let's make it. We'll give you a healthy break. Let's come back at 9:15.